The president is disappointed in how Sony has handled getting hacked and then threatened. George Clooney is disappointed in all of us. But here is another way to look at what happened to Sony. They didn't lose consumer information. They lost their own. So let's take a look at a research report from Brian Weiser of Pivotal Research Group, who he sent out a note last night. He was pointing out how what happened to Sony is likely to change what other corporations do. So his points were, one, executives are going to start to discuss less over email. It means that you're going to have to stay much closer to the home office. Number two, partner companies. A lot of things were revealed, in the Sony conversations over email about things they said, deals they had with the New York Times. And so discussions with partner companies are going to become much more clipped and much less full of trust. Number three, it will be harder to offer unique terms to each customer. I think that's fascinating. It's really difficult to offer a premium to...
I love the idea, Brendan, that we'll just use email less.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's a game for everybody. It's a game changer.
But I still don't understand why we didn't know this before. I feel like every time there's a hack, it's reaffirmed that you should not say things that you don't stand behind in email. But what we're learning from Sony is it's not just that you shouldn't say inappropriate things. You shouldn't say anything that you would want a competitor to learn.
And I give you credit for being out front on this, Leslie. I think, to another generation, it's like, duh. And to us, it's all brand new. The president sort of got a little bit of the, whoa, this is brand new, this is different. What is the president saying about Sony? What's the distinction there?
Well, so there's always been a semantics about cyber war versus hacking versus theft. And so often we in the media, we have a bad habit of taking attacks and turning them into actual war metaphors. When in fact, usually, what Anonymous did, for example, was a form of protest, even though it happened online. What is happening with Sony is harder to tell. I would agree with the president that it's not an act of war. It didn't destroy critical infrastructure. It didn't, shut down a power plant, which is certainly something that you could do with a hack if you wanted to.
But at the same time, that threat of war was still there. They threatened September 11th style attacks. If they had actually carried those out, I'm curious as to what the president's response would have been in that case.
This is part of the problem we do not yet have in place. During the Cold War, we knew what the tit for tat was. We knew, what merits in theory a nuclear response, what merits a conventional response. We don't have that yet with cyber at all. That's just those thoughts aren't there.
Is this a comedy? This movie?
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at the footage, and a lot of it isn't comedic.
I was kind of looking forward to seeing it.
I'm not judging the movie, but I read the executives, and I see that it's pretty bloody, gory. I mean, is that comedy?
Josh Wright, Tom says you don't party over the weekend, but I know you do fun things. Would you have gone to see this movie?
I would have gone to it after it hit all the headlines. That's for sure.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who might be put off by it, but I was actually made me very curious. The thing that's interesting to me is that this conversation has been bubbling beneath the surface for a long time. It's actually 10 years that the lawyers have been working on trying to develop treaties to manage cyber warfare and relations between states. But that hasn't reached the public consciousness. And the reality is that we have a lot of catching up to do. We have all these new media and we've got these new technologies. But you can still apply the same principles. Controlling your paper trail is something we could still do in the 20th century. Yeah. And what we're learning is that there are new ways to do that in the 21st century.
But to Josh's point, we don't have the appropriate response. That's the thing. If you say that if there's a cyber attack and you declare an attack, do you have a cyber attack back? Do you have a conventional attack back? We don't know what response is.
With you being out in front, I'm going to rip up the script here a little bit. I'm finishing the Kissinger book. The last chapter is on what you have been out front on for 2 years. You've got Secretary Kissinger, Dr. Kissinger, writing about Brendan Greeley's world and worry about internet and cyber and that. And Dr. Kissinger agrees we got to yank ourselves in to this new generation.
I think it's important to remember that in the Cold War, this took a decade to settle. Game theory was, just sort of somebody's idle idea in 1950. And then over the course of that decade, game theory was applied and it became sort of what we understand now as, an essential part of the Cold War. We don't have that yet because this is still relatively new. We just haven't worked that out yet.
The speeds are so different.
Yeah, and what does it even mean to respond to a cyber threat?
Yeah.
Is one of the questions that I have. We need to bring in some kind of technology expert, perhaps. But in the Cold War, someone launches a missile. Okay, great. You launch a missile in the Cold War. Someone else launches a missile. Do you measure your response by the damage you do to your enemy or your perceived enemy, or is it by the action you've taken? And then taking that principle to the world of cyber warfare.
Is it time for a good physics equation?
Please, we're right here.
Slew rate, 2 pi f times v.
You're all on your own.
That's like this, and we're in a new world where in the old days you had slower slew rates, slower reaction functions, and now with a cyber, it's like this.
But it's also not, cyber is a terrifying word, but there's also not as much damage as can be done. When we look at what happened to Sony, I think actually an act of vandalism is fair. It's just not that destructive.